Hello, dear students. Welcome to the third part of Chapter 4 Electoral Politics of Democratic Politics. Now, before starting the last topic of the chapter, let us quickly recall that what we have studied in the part 2, in the previous part. We studied about electoral constituencies. We studied about reserved constituencies. We studied about voter list. We also studied about nomination of the candidate. The next procedure is election campaign. After that, we studied about code of conduct during election campaign, and we also studied about the big day, that is polling and counting of votes. After that, we discussed what makes election in India democratic. In that, we talked about the Independent Election Commission, which is independent also and powerful also. We also studied what are the functions of the Election Commission of India. After that, we discussed about popular participation. In that, we compared some of the European countries with India in terms of turnout. What is turnout? Turnout indicates the percent of eligible voters who actually cast their votes. After that, we discussed about acceptance of election outcome. And today we'll move to the final topic, that is challenges to free and fair elections. Let us have a brief discussion. After that, we'll discuss in detail. So, challenges of free and fair election in India. Number 1, candidates and parties with lot of money may not be sure of their victory, but they do enjoy a big and unfair advantages over smaller parties and independents. In some parts of the country, candidates with criminal connection have been able to push others out of electoral race and to secure the ticket from major parties. Some families tend to dominate political parties. Tickets are distributed to relatives from these families. Very often, elections offer very little choice to ordinary citizens. For both the major parties are quite similar to each other, both in policies and practice. Smaller parties and independent candidates suffer a huge disadvantage compared to big parties. So, in the previous part, students, I was trying to convince you that election in India are democratic. But if we ask some deeper questions, if we go in deep, some of the questions which are needed to be answered are people's preference based on real knowledge? Means if we are casting our vote, if we are giving our vote to a particular political party or a particular candidate, do we have that real knowledge of that particular candidate? Or do we have the real knowledge of our power of voting? It must be answered, and it should be answered by the voter only. Is election really a level playing field for everyone? Means are all equal in this playing field of election? Can an ordinary citizen hope to win election? Of course, it can be asked, can an ordinary citizen hope to win elections if he contests elections? This kind bring the many limitations and challenges of Indian election to our attention. Now, What are these challenges? As you see, the point number 1, candidates use money power and muscle power. Although their victory is not sure, but still they enjoy a big advantage over the smaller parties. Number 1, because they are famous. Number 2, because they are having funds. They can funds which they spend during the elections, during the campaigns. If we also find that in some parts of the country, candidates with criminal connection, they are being given tickets. Why? Because political party, they want to win the election anyhow. Anyhow they have to win. So they give, in some part of the country, they give party ticket to the criminals. Very often we see in news televisions that a candidate who is in jail, he fights election, he contests election and wins. So how is it possible? This is one of the major challenge for free and fair election. In many political parties, we find that a political party is dominated by a single family. What you call is dynastic succession. In these parties, political party tickets are given to relatives, to the near and dear ones. Policies and programs are made by the family members. And when we talk of voting, we find that every political party, they promise very similar things, like will give jobs, will give electricity, will give good roads, will have a good health facility, will have good educational institutions, will have good health and institutions, this and that. But all are very similar. The promises of all political parties are very similar. So it is very tough for a person, for a citizen, to decide that to whom they should vote for. And the last one is your smaller parties and independent candidates. Since the independent candidates, they do not get party ticket from any of the major political parties or smaller parties, so they fight independently. They contest the election independently. So they face a huge disadvantage. Smaller parties, they also contest election, but they don't have the advantage. Why? Because larger parties, big parties, they are very famous and they spend a lot of money at the time of elections. So these were some of the points which shows that still election in India, they face a challenge of free and fair elections. Now students, as we have completed the chapter, let us quickly rewind what we have studied in this chapter. So we started with a newspaper article of Chaudhary Devilal, how the people of Haryana, they were eagerly of Haryana, a small people of Karnal in Haryana, they were eagerly waiting for their leader to come and to have his election campaign, to address the people. People were eagerly waiting. And we saw that since 1982, Congress was the ruling party. And at the time of elections in 1987, Chaudhary Devilal led a movement called Nyay Yudh. And he formed a new political party, Lok Dal. And during the election campaign, he promised that if his party won the election, his government would waive off the loans of farmers and small businessmen. So elections were held in the year 1987. Because of the promise of Chaudhry Devilal, people voted for Lokdal, and Lokdal alone won 60 out of 90 seats. After that, MLAs of the Lokdal, they decided that their leader will be Chaudhry Devilal. After that, governor invited Devilal to be the new chief minister. 3 days after the results were declared, Chaudhry Lal became the chief minister. As soon as he became the chief minister, his government issued a governmental order waiving the outstanding loans, what he promised, of small farmers and agricultural laborers and small businessmen. Again, after 4 years, in the 5th year, elections were held in the year 1991, but this time Lokdal lost the support of the people. Okay. After that, we discussed what is an election. So, an election is a formal decision-making process by which a population chooses an individual to hold public office. It is a mechanism by which people can choose their representatives at regular intervals and change them if they wish to do so. Elections are held to choose people's representatives. After that, we studied about why do we need elections. In this, we had a discussion that it is not possible for the people to come in a large community like India to sit daily on the daily basis to sit and discussion about the different matters, because number one, we are not having time, number two, we are not having that much knowledge to take decisions on every matters. After that, we discussed about the importance of election. Why elections are necessary? Because elections help people to choose leaders who will take decision on behalf of the people. Election allows people to choose who will form the government and take major decisions. Elections help to ensure people's power. It gives people supreme authority to choose efficient and trustworthy leaders. After that, we discussed that what makes an election democratic. In this, very first point, we discussed about universal adult franchise. If a person has attained the age of 18, he is eligible to cast his vote. Disregarding whether he is male, female, educated, uneducated, rich, poor, anyone can vote, but if he or she has to attain the age of 18. Election should offer choices to the people, means there should be two-party system, two or more political parties should be there, so that people should have choices. Election should offer choices to the people. There should be various political parties and candidates so that citizens can choose from them. The choice of selecting the rulers should be offered at a regular interval. In India, elections are normally held after every 5 years. The most preferred candidate should get elected. In India, we follow the post system. The candidate who secures maximum number of valid votes is declared as winner. Elections should be held in free and fair manner, and people should be in a position to cast their vote without fear or favor. After that, we discussed about some of the disadvantages of a political competition. The major factor which came out was it creates a sense of disunity between the people. After that, we discussed about the advantages of political competition. What is the advantage? In this, we talked about the incumbent. It is the term incumbent. Incumbent means the existing party had to work harder to get elected. Competition makes the party to do the service for people. Why political competition is necessary? Because it offers people a choice that if the existing party is not working well, is not making those policies and programs which are favorable for the people, then they can, after every regular interval, they can choose another one. So these are some of the advantages of political competition. Okay, now we move towards the process of election. The very first one which we discussed, the first step is electoral constituencies. First of all, if constituencies are made, in the state assembly elections, the state is divided into different areas for the purpose of election on the basis of population. And in the Lok Sabha election, the entire country is divided into 543 constituency, and each constituency is called a seat. We say na that this candidate has won this party has won this much seat. That seat is called constituency. After the formation of electoral constituency, the second one comes is the reserved constituency. Reserved constituency, there are some constituencies in our country which are reserved for ST, SC and OBC candidate according to their proportion in the population. This has been done to uplift the condition of backward classes. So students, once the reserved constituency is decided, after that voter list is being made. All those who have attained the age of 18, their name is included in the list, and those who have moved out of the place or those who have died during the period, their name is deleted from the list. This is what you call is voter list. After every 5 years, this list is again prepared or verified so that any false voting do not take place. For this purpose, a EPIC card is made. EPIC, EPIC means election photo identity card. Election Commission has made the election photo identity card, although till now it is not compulsory for a person to carry this card while they are going to vote. They can produce other identity cards like Aadhaar card or other government identity cards. Once the voter list is prepared, after that nomination of candidate takes place. Nomination means if a candidate wants to contest for election, the political party gives party ticket to those candidates, deserving candidates. If a person who has attained the age of 25 wants to contest but no party is giving him or her the party ticket, they can contest the election independently. Means they are independent candidates. They belong to none of the political parties. Now, they have to give those who are nominated, those who are getting the party ticket, they need to give an affidavit. And what does that affidavit, that legal declaration contains? That details of pending criminal cases against the candidate, assets, liabilities, and the educational qualification of the candidate. Not only asset and liabilities of the candidate, but his family members also. After that, we talked about the election campaign. In election campaign, we discussed how before 2 weeks of the election date, political leaders come to the constituency and make promises to the people, like Chaudhry Devilal did in Karnal in Haryana. But there is some code of conduct also. What is that code of conduct? According to our election law, no party or candidates can bribe or threaten voters. They cannot appeal to them in the name of caste or religion. Use of government resources for election campaign, or they cannot spend more than 20 lakh rupees in constituencies in an assembly election. Use of any place of worship for election propaganda is strictly prohibited. Use of government vehicles, aircrafts, and officials for election purpose is strictly prohibited. They cannot announce, or minister shall not lay foundation stones of any new project, or cannot take any big policy decisions or make any promises of providing public facilities. This comes under the code of conduct. After that, we discussed about the big day of polling and counting. The final stage of an election is the day when the voter cast or poll their vote. The person's names which is there on the voters list can go cast their vote. Once a voter gets inside a booth, the election officials identify the person, put a mark on her finger, and allow the person to vote. And finally, the result is declared. Now, after this, we discussed about what makes election in our country democratic. In this, we discussed that who is conducting this election. The answer is the Election Commission of India. Election Commission of India is conducting the election, and Election Commission is independent also and powerful also. He is appointed by the President of India, but once he is appointed, he cannot be removed. He is independent to take all certain decisions. Now, what are the decisions which he can take? There are some functions of Election Commission. What are those functions? Election Commission takes decision on every aspect of conduct and control of election, from the announcement of elections to the declaration of result. All the powers are reserved by the Election Commission of India. It implements the code of conduct. Just now we discussed about a code of conduct, and punishes any candidate or party that violates it. It can also order the government to follow some guidelines to prevent use and misuse of governmental power, to enhance its chance to win elections, or to transfer some government officials. When on the election duty, government officers work under the control of Election Commission and not the government. And the last one, they give advice to the President on certain issues. What are those issues? Those issues are related to elections only. Now, what makes election democratic in India? The first one I told you, who conducts the election, that is Election Commission of India. Second one is your popular participation. If we talk about popular participation, we are talking about the voter turnout. And what is voter turnout? It is the percentage of eligible voters who actually cast their vote. And if we compare the European nations, turnout in European nations, it has declined. But in India, the turnout has either remained stable or actually gone up. So if people are voting, it means that people are having faith. If elections wouldn't have been democratic, or they would have been undemocratic, people wouldn't have voted. They wouldn't have enjoyed their voting rights. But if we look at the graph, we find that India people have faith in elections, and that's why the turnout has remained stable, or it has actually gone up if we compare India from the rest of the European nations. And the last one is your acceptance of election outcome. One final test of free and fairness of election has in the outcome itself. If the elections are not free and fair, the outcome always favors the powerful. In such a situation, the ruling parties do not lose election. But in India, it is seen that very oftenly in the national elections or state elections, the ruling party often loses the election. If we look at MPs and MLAs, 50% of the MPs and MLAs, they lose elections after every 5 years. So it proves that elections in India are free and fair, and they are truly democratic. This is what we were discussing till just now. And the final topic was challenges of free and fair election. We have already discussed this in today's part, in the starting of the chapter. So I hope you understood the chapter. Thank you for your generous support.